Our top story this morning is the visit by President Uhuru Kenyatta to Raila Odinga's Nyanza stronghold as he tries to woo a stubborn opposition. Talk comes barely a fortnight after Raila, who is Uhuru's main rival in the August polls, campaigned in the president's hometown of Kiambu. Will be touring Baringo County, Chemolingot and Eldama Ravine areas. So these are the stories that we are keeping an eye on. We have our reporters on the ground, but also in studio I have a panel with whom we are talking matters to do with the political scene and some of the banter that we are seeing on the campaign trail. I have Charles Kipkulei, who is a political analyst. I have Martha Marwa, who is an ANC candidate for Kajiado Woman Rep position, and I also have Dr. Temi, who is part of the NASA Secretariat. Many thanks for staying with us. And just before we went on break, Dr. Temi, we were talking about how the various political parties are attacking the institutions. We've talked about Jubilee poking holes on the credibility of the courts. We've seen the kind of rulings they've made in the recent past. But Charles here says that NASA is also playing, both cards, double standards, because it also is perceived to be seen as having attacking the IBC. What's your take on that?
We are not attacking IBC, but we are trying to address ourselves to IBC to deal with the gaps that we are seeing in the whole process, particularly the procurement process. We did not say that Al Ghurair, after printing the lower level, ballots, they are okay. Here we are saying the due process of the procurement process was not properly followed. And if there was to be single sourcing, there are guidelines. There is a framework on how you do single sourcing. Maybe government to government or, something.
I guess the question was, why was this not an issue when this particular, supply of the papers supplied papers for by-elections where we also saw NASA candidates actually winning in those elections?
You see, in the case of by-elections, this is a one-off. And a lot of times, you don't take a hammer to deal with an issue which is like what you can deal with a spray. We focused on winning the by-elections. We didn't really care much because we knew there was a company which had been awarded, a tender after 2013. You remember the one in UK? And then there was this other company which could do the by-elections. This is one of. But here we are talking about the future of the country. We are talking about national, the psyche of the country. So when it comes to that, everybody pays attention. And the little detail counts. Right. In this particular case, we are realizing even that the cost of one ballot paper is twice what they are charging than what it was charged elsewhere, including the last elections in Tanzania. We have not talked about it. What we are saying, it is costing us twice as much. So if the due process had been followed, it could have been different. But nonetheless, if there is to be single sourcing, then it is also fair that you call all the key stakeholders and try to convince them why you need to go this particular route. Right. Because the elections in Africa, elections in Kenya are very emotive issue.
All right. And just talking about due process, of course, now we have seen that the IBC is today actually meant to be holding a public forum just to include that public participation that they were instructed by the courts. But at the same time, they are appealing this ruling. Do you see this as a bit of a confusing? Can the two of them happen? Are they two not mutually exclusive? They appeal and they're going ahead.
It is ironical. Right. You cannot be appealing in the courts and at the same time you are trying to follow to fulfill the court orders. But courts must be obeyed. If we don't obey the courts, then we have no country. We must obey the courts. Because the opposite of that is anarchy. So as they do this, then they have to make one decision, strategic decision. Do they continue with the appeals or do they continue with the process which they were ordered by the courts? But you cannot have the two sides of the same coin at the same time.
I think, Sharon, on this issue, when you look at we need to look at the implication of these cases on the ability of the IBC to function, because the IBC right now is caught between a rock and a very hard place.
Right.
Now they need to ensure that they meet these timelines, they need to do everything. They're saying that the process of procurement is lengthy and everything.
Right.
So that they satisfy the process, so that the next time they issue a presidential ballot tender,
Right.
it shall not be contested.
Right.
When you look even at the issue of the other court case that was concerning KPMG, the resultant delay in that led to now the situation where we have a register that cannot go to Parliament because Parliament is already on recess. And even constituting it, recalling Parliament right now, legally there is a provision, but realistically, to call it and to consider that register is a problem. So, which is why, in as much as court cases and the court continues to be the last resort, we should also put into perspective the issue of the timelines and the impact of these litigations on the preparedness and even the processes. Because right now, if I go to court today,
that's what
and
the
I say,
IBC is actually forming grounds on its appeal.
in fact, there is even talk that the next court case that is going to be lodged against the IBC is on the register because it has not gone to Parliament as per the Elections Act, which was amended in December. But when you look at it, what happened? There was a court case which delayed the audit process. By the time the audit was complete, Parliament had gone on recess. So at the same time today, if this case has not, if IBC says we are awaiting the results of the appeal and they are time barred, then what happens?
We had a serious problem with the audit because the KPMG, we know their core competency in audit. But this is a very specialized area. Auditing elections processes, procedures, and the biometrics and the like. Now, they were supposed to have a strategic partner. They were supposed to work in conjunction with the two key players who are, contesting this issue. And right from the beginning, we said KPMG does not have the capacity. Now, they were also going to rely on government institutions, which are disjointed.
Okay, but talking practically as of where we are now, we know that by 18th, which is, I believe, next week on Tuesday, is when, the presidential ballot papers were meant as per the IBC calendar, were meant to be printed. I mean, things are up in the air as we speak right now. Are we looking at a possible delay of the elections, practically speaking, or what would be a prudent way forward if everything was to go on as...
What we are saying on this is, as NASA, is that there is enough time to print presidential ballots from a credible institution other than the one which had been awarded this particular tender.
The meeting that the IBC held with the presidential candidates on Monday ended up in naught. The Jubilee Party has said it's not engaging in any further meetings with the IBC.
And
so practically speaking,
is it our problem?
You asked a question, the prudent way forward. Appealing is not the prudent way forward. Going forward and looking for the printer, the person who can be able to print, it is the best way forward, so that you can be able to meet the timelines. IBC should be able to look into this, avoid the appealing, let them get the person who is able to get the tender, and do the printing. Otherwise, printing for the presidential candidates can take a very short time. It will take a long time.
But I think what we need to consider also is that the award for the printing of election ballot papers was awarded as a singular tender. There was no tender specific for presidential, MP, Senate, governor, and everything. It was a singular tender. So if you go today to now the legal provisions of that tender, and you breach that contract with Al-Ghurair and you tell them now, we are no longer printing presidential ballot papers, they have already mobilized materials for the printing of the ballot papers. It shall incur a cost to the country. And that will essentially mean a cancellation in whole of the entire ballot printing process, which is why there is wisdom in what the IBC is saying. They want to go. Can the IBC be given an opportunity to say, fine, we did an error in terms of not probably conducting public participation and consultation as you could have wanted. But this is our case. Can you hear us out on this one so that we do not compromise the election? Because one of the things that the communication that needs to come, especially from NASA and even Jubilee even right now, is that number one, we are committed to ensuring that elections are held on 8th of August. Number one. So that when that becomes the overriding principle, your other actions become governed by that.
But Charles, can that be the overriding principle? Because the reason why this is happening in the first place was, NASA discrediting, the impartiality of this printing firm. And then, so what then becomes the cost of having and wanting to have the elections on the 8th of August without, fail? At what cost, maybe, is the question?
This is it. Yeah. My take is this, and our take as NASA is this. Up to today, 10 years later, the aftermath of the post-election mess, because of a bungled election, is still being felt. It's still felt in our country up to today. From the economic front, we expected the GDP to have grown up to a certain level, Vision 2030. We had to give way to a lot of very grand ideas to deal with the basics. The cost of 2.5, 2.7 billion compared to the stability of this country after the 8th, to me, is not negotiable.
I'm not talking about the issue of cost.
So,
what I'm trying to say, my brother, is...
Yeah, let me finish.
Let him finish, then we'll...
So, what I'm trying to say is this. If there is contestation on any issue, let it be resolved upfront, including negotiating a partial fulfillment of this contract, whereby these other bits, the presidential, and I think the court was very clear, you don't have to cancel the whole tender, but since the biggest contestation is on this, resolve it. Resolve it for the sake of the country.
Right.
That is what I would say. Let's resolve it.
It makes sense.
Let's resolve it. Even if there are consequences, if there are penalties for terminating this bid, so that perspective is yeah, exactly.
Which is what I'm
anyway, Sharon, like Dr. is saying, there is need to consider sealing any loophole that can lead to after the elections having any kind of trouble. We wouldn't like to go back to 2007, and nobody wants it. To every Kenyan who is on a right mind thinking, there's nobody who wants any kind of fight. So it is good for NASA, or even the whole of us, the Kenyan, including Jubilee, to ensure that we have fair, credible, without any loophole, that which could be seen, not being sealed. It is wise to seal any loophole that you can. That if this is not done, then the consequence Al-Ghurain, yeah. I think they know in anything, whenever you're doing a tendering process, the legal aspect is something that anyone should always be taking into precaution.
Yeah, I think, Sharon, I wanted to say that the issue of the cost should not be should not lock us from looking at the critical issues of the law. I agree on that, and in fact, myself, the pronunciation of the courts in terms of saying that due process must be followed when conducting the procurement, I agree with that. The issue that we need to look at bigger than that is that the preparedness of the IBC should also be a consideration that we need to put in place. Because remember, in the 2013 election, most of the BVR kits failed. The reason why they failed is because they were deployed, they were delivered, I think, a few days to the elections. Kenyans didn't even have time to test these things. We just delivered and deployed them to the field. But if there is this timeline that allows even for proper scrutiny, and we say, because I think the contestation around the issue of Al-Ghurain was that probably they may print more ballot papers, they may deliver something like that. If you give it 18th, that was last week, next week, we could have had at least even 2 or 3 weeks to even have a way of safeguarding and ensuring what was promised is what has been delivered, as opposed to when we start running on almost deadlines that elections probably are tomorrow and papers are arriving today. We'll not even have time to know where is these papers. You are breeding grounds for confusion, for people to rush, and now creating even greater probabilities for failures that could have been addressed if we give enough time. So my argument is that in whereas that we need to ensure due process is followed, we need to consider that August 8th is cast in stone in the Constitution. And if we want to say that we want to look at the greater consideration and the greater interest of the country, we do not want to plunge the country into a constitutional crisis on account of a matter that we can address and agree as gentlemen, not necessarily in court. Because I think, again, the challenge that we have...
agreeing as gentlemen is the biggest thing that is
the biggest issue.
Yeah, it's the biggest issue that we have.
Again, there will be no constitutional crisis. I think the Constitution is very clear in the event of such an eventuality, what should be done. I don't want to go there because we are more than ready to get into the pitch and play on the 8th of August. However, In 2013, there was this UK company which printed ballot papers, did all that, only later to realize that there were extra ballots. We know what route they used, we know how we now know, we didn't know then. We gave IEBC the benefit of doubt. We know how they were brought into the country, we know where they were marked, and cumulatively when you analyze, because today there is a software which can pick, add data and analyze, there were an extra 2 million votes which were cast for the president alone, and no other candidate. So we are saying now to make sure that this does not happen. The Rivery, please don't get your jerseys from Kiro.
So those remain allegations.
River Road.
Let me say, NASA is ready for 8th August 2017. Jubilee is trying to paint.
You are ready to play for the
Jubilee is painting us. It's trying to paint us and profile us that NASA is not ready for the elections. Let me make it clear, NASA, we are ready for the elections come 8th August 2017. All Kenyans are ready, and that painting us that we are the ones who are not ready, I totally disagree with it, and I'm telling the Kenyans that we are ready for the elections come 8th August 2017 as NASA. Yes.
And of course, you've had Jubilee. Duale says you're very ready to negotiate for Nusumkate. That's why you're trying to discredit the elections process.
I think, Sharon, the interesting thing that we are realizing this time around is this election is going to be defined for the lack of another organizing question. This election has become an election that shall be about process. The process of the election. Fair, unfair, how it has been. We are focusing so much on the referee, and the issues that should actually define this election are being lost. Which is why it is also
fair.
What are
those issues that you feel?
The issues, even the manifestos which were launched, they need to go out and tell Kenyans, because right now when you go to a political rally, the only thing they talk about is IBC, Al-Gurai, the attack on the judiciary, attack on the IBC.
Don't you think the credibility and integrity of the process is just as important as
it is important, but I think that should not be the foundation of Kenyans to make a judgment on who is the better candidate to lead this country at any level. Because I speak from a perspective of trying to think like a common Kenyan. If I want to elect you, I'll not elect you based on whether or not the IBC is free or not. I'll elect you based on what you offer to me in terms of your policy proposals and your manifesto.
But I also want to be sure that if I have elected you, the vehicle that will ensure my vote has actually been registered is,
which is what I'm saying.
Credible.
It is good for us to dispense with this thing once and for all. And I hope that if there are other players, because this issue of stakeholders in elections being aspirants only should also be disabused. We need other election stakeholders, even civil society, the religious movement, to come and say, we check leadership in this and ask the key players, if you have an issue with the judiciary, can you sort it out? Can you declare that you are going to have confidence in the elections? That should be even directed to the president. And NASA should be told, can you give us your catalogue of cases that you have, so that we finish them once and for all, and then Kenyans are able to dispense with this issue and go to the real issues affecting them. Because what you are seeing is one case at a time. You win this one, then you unleash another one. You win this one, you unleash another one.
Dr. Teme, do you think this is a healthy discourse? Talking about the real issues, what should be priority?
I
do you think it's a healthy discourse that shows we are, we are keen on seeing a democratized process?
I think looking at our elections from the time we started multi-party democracy, there are gains. We made some tremendous progress, because even those days there were no-go zones for some certain political parties, and the lie law like envelopes, and the one you will cut your figure and all that. Now you see today all the candidates are campaigning everywhere fairly freely, and this is good. It is a process, and this process has come about because particularly of the people who are in NASA. They have been consistent that we need to democratize this particular country. They have been consistent that we need to devolve the country so that we can see the development at the grassroots. We had a unitary, where all decisions were being made in Nairobi. Now if you go to any of the rural county headquarters, you find there is a small traffic jam. That's how we have devolved. Now coming to this about the IBC and the like, if we see there are gaps, we will continue agitating for them until the feud is leveled for posterity. We will not stop there.
But what is the role of other players? We have elections observers, we have
elections observers. This is an issue of stakes. How much stake do you have in this? There is the passing one, and there are the real stakeholders with the serious stakes. The political players have got very high stakes. in the whole game.
Right.
So that is why somebody who is in the civil society, they will take it passing, or the churches and the like. One time they are there, the other time they are not there. But the political players, particularly those in NASA, they know this is the final push. And we have got the country liberalized. If we are talking of taking 45% of GDP to the counties to devolve it, what is better than that? So in terms of manifesto, that alone, we are only taking 15%, and you can see the impact. If we are saying we are taking 45%, we don't have to explain many other things. Okay, so we'll explain when we get to power.
All right. Okay, so our time is almost up, but I want to just get your closing remarks. But I'll start with you, Martha, on a very crucial issue that can't get lost among the other crucial issues that Charles talks about, which is the 2/3, gender representation. And we just saw yesterday a few women politicians led by Dr. Julia Ojambo saying that they will move to court to ensure that the other parliament, the 12th parliament, does not sit if it's not constitutionalized. Do you think enough is being done to see? Do you get a sense that this is being considered as a priority issue?
Not really, but what we still have a chance to ensure that this happens. We have several women who have come up as MPs, as governors, as MCAs, and of course the women rep. It's a woman, except where we have Nairobi, a gentleman vying as a woman rep, which is so funny. But I'm urging the women and the Kenyans as a whole, kindly support women wherever they're standing, as MPs, as governors, as MCAs. Kindly vote for them, and especially women. Do you think
political parties are doing enough to? Because there was the argument that political parties need to front more women, because we have, I think, just about 132 women against more than 2,000 men vying for the various elected seats. Not really.
Like I said the last time, Kenya is about number 100 in the world in having women in parliament, and we've not done so much. That is why we are requesting that as women, especially in the women rep position, which we are sure that the women must get in, 47 of them. Wherever we are vying, we are requesting that the people voting for the right candidates who will be able to articulate the issues of women and ensure that the women defend that seat by electing the right credible women representatives. And for Kajiado, I'm requesting the Kajiado people to vote for Martha Kerubomaro as the women rep, because I am committed to deliver, to perform, and ensure that that seat of the women rep is well protected.
I've offered you a campaign. Probably it would look like I've offered you a campaign platform, but thank you for the thoughts on that. And maybe our closing remarks, Charles.
Yes.
Between now 26 days to the general election, we have various players, the IBC, the courts, and the politicians. Sorry, I'm having a cold. What is your thought about how things should go between now and then?
Sorry for that. I think, Sharon, going forward, as I've said earlier, it is important that as a country, the issues that may distract Kenyans from making their decisions should be dealt with and dispensed once, so that we are able to sit down and now start focusing on issues. For example, today, NASA is going to Baringo County. Baringo County has faced a perennial issue of insecurity. As late as last night, media reporting was that there was a banditry attack in a part of Baringo County. So it will be prudent for NASA to go to Baringo and engage the people of Baringo on how they are going to address this issue of insecurity. Give them a policy alternative addressing the issue of insecurity, something that is realistic and across the country, so that Kenyans are accorded an opportunity to make judgments based on issues rather than distractions like the IBC is fair or not, or even the common one of party, the 6-piece, and even probably the ethnicity. So my take is that it is time that the key players dispense with the side issues that address the process concerns, and then they go into, because we are in the home run. This is where especially a critical mass of Kenyans take their decision, so that we start now engaging Kenyans on these manifestos, because they were launched 1 week down the line. We've forgotten everything, and I've heard Daktari saying we'll discuss that. We should not do that, Daktari. Let us talk about manifestos now, because we may choose the wrong person, even a person minus a manifesto. So let us do it now, go to Kenyans and discuss with them. But I think on the issues of the institutions, it is prudent. Speaking as a Kenyan, I want to say that the president and to believe the party should desist from attacking the judiciary, because this is the key institution that is going to determine the standing of our country, especially after the elections.
Right.
Equally, the NASA coalition should, at least if they have concerns to the courts, let us dispense with them within a timely manner, so that we continue. As I said earlier, we stop these distractions and we go to the elections focusing on the issues.
All right, thank you, Charles.
I want to very closely, number one, on the gender issue. It is on record. The NASA presidential flag bearer went even to Parliament to lobby so that this bill could be passed. Unfortunately, what happened, we all know. To the women of this country, we gave them opportunities as much as we could, and still it is a process. And we are going to continue. Or even sit down with the individual groups and explain your predicament. Explain to Kenyans whatever you may be facing. Because anything short of that, once bitten, twice shy. NASA will stop at nothing, but to make sure that the elections are free, fair, credible, and they are seen to be free and fair and credible.
All right.
And on the 8th of August, yeah, we are sweeping it.
I guess it all remains to be seen. So we want to take a short break right now. Perhaps we'll have a little more chat when we return. We'll see how that pans out. But thank you very much for your contributions on our conversation this morning. So we take a short break here on News Center. Don't go too far. We have more news when we return, including a look at the IWAF under 18 Cups that is taking place here in Nairobi starting today. Don't go too far.